very exciting about this upcoming tour with Vio-Lence. Such a good pairing. How did this tour come to be?
Uh, well, we know the guys in violence. I know them a little more casually than the other guys do, I think. But our manager, I believe he also manages them as well. So he concocted in his evil plot that we should probably all go to South America, and it just kind of grew, and we're doing a Latin American tour that starts in Mexico City on January 31st, and I think it ends in maybe Brazil on the 11th of February. So after that, we come home. We'll go back out with Vio-Lence in the U.S. For a short run up in the East and Midwest. We're looking forward to it. I think it is a good pairing. They were a band that were, uh, I think they kind of started around the same time that we did. So they got their first album out a couple of years before we got our first one out. But strangely enough, their first record deal, we were also being talked to by the same label that released that album
Oh,
about releasing Slaughter in the Vatican. And at the time, uh, Exhorder was in the middle of a breakup, so we didn't have a band. So the easy decision was definitely, Vio-Lence is ready. They're going. So they ended up getting the deal, and then eventually we moved on and got our album out in 1990. But that's the old story as I remember it.
wow. Very cool to know, especially seeing the show now. I can't wait to see you guys in Boston. Um, Now, how does the band go about putting together a set list for a show?
Um, well, most importantly, you got to pick songs that I think are good live songs because sometimes a song might be great on an album, but may not translate as well into the live show. So we usually pick songs that I think are uh, gonna do well in that regard. Now, usually we go pretty heavy on Slaughter in the Vatican. It's been the fan favorite for a long time, and give the people what they want, right? So we do a handful of songs off of there. We do a couple off of the Law, a couple off of Mourn the Southern Skies, but we're going to be throwing in obviously some newer songs into the set as well because the album comes out March 8th. So by the time we're going to do a couple of new ones when we're on tour in South America, but we're also going to probably play three or four uh, per night off of the new album. We don't want to go too crazy with it, kill everybody with the new stuff because you know I know when I go see a band play, I want to see a nice mixture. It is disappointing to me sometimes when I see a band play one or two songs from their new album, but at the same time, uh, you have to be smart and not force your new product down everybody's throats. If it's good, they'll like it.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, Defectum Omnium is very exciting. It's the fourth album out March 8th, you said. Very, very exciting. Now, what made it, when did you realize it was time for the band's fourth record?
As soon as lockdown started, we were on tour with Overkill. 2 days before lockdown happened, Bobby Blitz came to our bus and said, "Yo, I hate to break it to y'all, but this is the last show of the tour. Even though we're supposed to have two more, lockdown is starting. Get everybody get home and hunker down." And that's what we did. So the first thing we said when we got home was, "Let's get to work." And I improved my home studio situation, and Jason and Sasha worked together some. I worked with a drum program, and we just crafted the album over a couple of years. Kept the parts that worked, got rid of the parts that didn't work, and improved the songwriting together. And uh, the three of us, Jason, Sasha, and I, uh, contributed. equally on this album. So we also produced it ourselves. It's been a long road to get it out. It's actually been complete and like mastered since the summertime. So we're
Wow.
kind of going on like 6 months since it's been completed before, the artwork's done and then it's finally ready to release. But it doesn't make sense to drop the album before we can get out and tour it. So that's the idea.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like it's very DIY, which is cool. What do you use, like Pro Tools for
Um,
this?
I'm not sure what the guy who tracked the music uses. I'm not sure what program he uses, to be honest with you. I'm sure I asked him then, and I just don't remember. But we tracked it at Fat Track Studios in Bright, Indiana, which is not too far from where Jason lives in Ohio.
Cool.
So all the music was tracked there. I tracked all the vocals here at home myself. I just use Audacity, the free software you get. I literally used Audacity, um, my Scarlett interface, a $250 microphone, and my laptop that runs on Windows 7. That's how I track these
Wow.
vocals. I'm not kidding you.
That's
And
amazing.
I asked Jens Bogren in the very beginning. I sent him a sample of what I do here at the house. I said, "Is this sufficient for you?" He said, "Give me good takes and I'll make that work." So I'm sure he used preamps and plugins and all that good stuff. But yeah, I just gave him good takes and he did the magic.
That's amazing, man. How's it been working with Nuclear Blast for this release?
I love the fact that they kind of just let us do what we want to do. Back in the day when we were on Roadrunner, there's a lot more micromanaging, and probably for a good reason. I would say, young guys in their 20s are kind of harder to keep focused than old men. Uh, so they really kind of gave us free reign and creative control on just about everything. Only a couple of times have they stepped in and said, "What about this? What about this?" And in fact, we had a tough time deciding what was going to be our feature debut single. And Monty Connor made it. He said, "I'm going to make it easy for you. Your song is Year of the Goat." And we were like, "Okay, I'll buy that." So it seems like it's connecting and resonating well with the people. We've had 170,000 plays in our first week on YouTube. That's better than anything else we've ever done. So I'd say good call, Monty.
It's doing great on Spotify too. A great single, man. Really awesome
Yeah, thank you.
to hear it. Now you've been able to listen to this album for 8 months now. How do you feel it stands out in the rest of the band's catalog?
Well, it's no secret that we've always kind of had regrets about the first two albums. We made a lot of mistakes on them, and the producers that we worked with did their best to salvage the projects on a low budget. But the people love those albums, so I can't take away from that. You just always have an idea going into an album what you want it to sound like, and when it comes to the end and it doesn't sound the way you want it, it's disappointing. We did not have that problem with More in the Southern Skies. We sonically made an album that sounded the way we always wanted to sound, like a live band, a big, broad sound. And we've I think we've succeeded in doing the same thing on this album, Defectum Omnium. And I don't think that much about the older albums once they're released. I listen to an album when I'm writing it and before it's released almost constantly, to the point of I can no longer be objective about it anymore. And I like, does it even sound good? I have no idea anymore. And so you try to walk away from it. But once it's released, I kind of peel back from it unless I'm listening to it to get, refamiliar for rehearsals and stuff. Uh, it belongs to the people once it's released, and I no longer carry the burden of it just being in our back pocket. But I think I'm taking the long way to answer your question. I really feel like this might be the strongest album I've ever been a part of, period. And I'm not just saying that because I've made some albums before where I've been like, well, It's not the best album I've ever done, but it's okay. You know. But this one, I think it's a journey, it's an experience, and the songwriting, we were painstakingly paying attention to details in the songwriting process just to serve the songs the best and make the best quality product we could and present it in a way that takes people on a roller coaster ride, basically. Lots of emotion, lots of things where people can go, I know what they're talking about here. I can feel that they're speaking to me. I got that. You know, to me, that's important because it's not. It doesn't matter what it meant to me. What matters is what does it mean to the listener.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's very exciting to hear, man. I cannot wait to listen to this new record. Now, you were talking about some of the older material. I'd love to know, like, looking back at like yourself as a musician, how much do you feel your creative process has evolved since that first demo?
Oh Lord, I mean, just being so much more experienced, not only as a musician but as a human, um, and as a professional. The honest, raw qualities of the very first recordings we ever did were magical because you know it was pure, it was still new, and that's something that's hard to replicate. It really is, but but you always want to approach each project you're working on as seriously as anything else that you've ever done. There's no point to me in writing songs and recording them just to fill up the air. I don't get that. You know, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to me. And a lot
Yeah.
of bands do it.
Yeah. Unfortunately so. Now what I love about your band is it's not just thrash, there's a little bit of hardcore you can tell and some of the music. Uh how much of an impact has hardcore had on your life?
Well, a lot of people may not know this, but when Exhorder first formed, the heavy metal community did not embrace us. We could not get a gig. They
Hmm.
didn't want anything to do with us. We were ugly. We didn't play hair metal, and the girls didn't care about us. So, so the punk rock community said, "We'll give you some shows." So the very first Exhorder show was at a NoFX gig, um,
Wow.
and we went on to play shows with Agnostic Front, Henry Rollins Band, Corrosion of Conformity back in the punk days. These were bands that we went out and did support slots with, and they were all so cool to us. Really gave us good advice, treated us really cool. Punk rock to me is something that is as much of a mindset as it is a style of music. And that's one thing I think that I took away from my years as a punk rocker and in the punk rock community was just that mindset. The the you have to stand up against certain things, but you also have to rally together, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
And it's all good stuff. But yeah, all that punk rock influence that you're hearing on this new album is very honest. The three remaining members from when we got back together in 2017, myself, Jason, and I, we all are punk rock fans, and and I think it was just kind of a no brainer. It was like I really felt like maybe we should have even had more of a punk influence in the early days in the music. We did, and it's there, but I think it's even more prominent now.
Yeah. Interesting. Really, really cool to hear, man. We're talking about More of the Southern Skies came out in 2019 and marked the end of the 17-year release gap between the second and third album. How do you reflect on that 17-year window without an Exhorder release?
27,
27?
27. Yes, I'm not kidding you.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
God.
Yeah. So
It's older than me.
I mean, it is what it is, right? But this band was always plagued with inner turmoil and inner conflict, and we always had a difficult time working together for an extended period of time. Uh, and it seems like we've finally gotten to the point where there's harmony on the inside of the band, and that goes a long way when it comes to traveling in close quarters for long periods of time, having to rehearse for a week or two leading up to even going on tour, living together every day. You better like each other, and if you don't, you better be able to at least work with each other. And that was always problematic for us throughout our history. So I'm grateful now to have three other guys that I work with that it's just laid back and cool. And even when shit kind of hits the fan, we're all still like, just let's solve it. Let's deal with it and move on from it, instead of just having a whole lot of uh, chaos within the infrastructure. It's just no good for anybody.
Yeah, yeah. Now, more in the Southern Skies. What was it even like going back in the studio after such a long hiatus, working on a new
Uh,
Exhorder release?
I think the hardest part was just getting our sea legs back with what we needed to be. When we were in the writing process and doing demos and stuff, I recall that our manager at the time came to us and said, y'all are gonna need a couple more thrashy songs on this album. You don't have enough, and you're going to alienate your fan base. And it's like, really? And he's like, yeah. Like I think at the time the only thrashy song was My Time, and so
Wow.
we, in order to get to that result quicker, we did like we did on The Law, where we robbed two songs off of our first demo and put them on The Law. We went back and there was one song left to rob. So we took Ripping Flesh and re recorded it and put it on the album with Chris Nail on drums as a guest. And then uh, we wrote the song Beware the Wolf, which was the last song written for that album, if I remember correctly. Uh, it was just something that had to happen. I mean, we weren't even thinking like a thrash band at the time because we'd been away from it for so long. And but now I think definitely for me, now that I'm playing guitar, I have a whole new appreciation for that style of music. I just kind of stopped listening to that music on a regular basis. It's not like I started hating it or anything. I just stopped listening. I guess when I was no longer an angry young man, I just stopped listening to angry young man music. And uh and then now it's like, I get it. You're like, I have a new appreciation for it. And you don't just have to be young to perform this music. You can still talk about real things and experiences from an older point of view rather than just teen angst. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was challenging for sure, but it's clicked for us now.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very cool to hear, man. How do you get signed to Nuclear Blast for this release?
That was we were still under contract with them from we did a 2 album deal with them when we did More in the Southern Skies. So so this was the second option in that contract, but it was
Got it.
actually quite easy. The fact that Monty Connor is the A&R guy there. He was our A&R guy at Roadrunner. He always believed in the band. He believed in my other band, Floodgate, and signed them to Roadrunner too. So I've always had Monty's support, as and not just for me, but for Exhorder especially. And he heard the demo of My Time when we did it, and he just heard that one song and told our manager, "I want it. Let's sign them. Let's get it." He saw where it was
Wow.
going,
Yeah. Wow. Very, very
and
cool to hear.
yeah, he's one of the best people I know, and he's a dear friend. Uh, he also trusts our process. They did not micromanage us on this project. They let us have artistic control, and if there was any suggestions on their side, uh, if we liked it, we used it, and if we didn't, they didn't care. It's just uh, I think it says a lot about where we are in our process, but I don't know if it's so much Nuclear Blast versus Roadrunner as it is maybe just uh, older guys versus younger guys. Who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. Like it's so interesting because I feel like every band in like the 80s and 70s, like they all had all the labels practically micromanaged, if not,
Yeah,
even more. Now it seems like it's the complete opposite, where it's like, what, just have us the music and we'll
yeah,
take care
and
of the rest.
you know, unfortunately for the pop stars, they don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
The pop industry is really bad about using up their artists and casting them aside once they're done with them, and controlling everything. And this type of music is a lot different. It's artist based instead of admin based, and uh, there's money to be made in this industry. But the pop industry admin would absolutely hate working with bands like us because we write our own songs and they can't control everything, which is why that side of the industry has always kind of treated us like a dirty secret. Like why sometimes you go shopping online for something and you're looking for a metal catalog and there's no metal catalog. It's all just filtered under rock because they want us to go away because they can't control us.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's almost in a way in some senses have gotten worse in some elements. Especially with there's so many artists who are just completely just puppets to their labels
Yeah.
and industry, and it's really sad to see. Now, you've seen the industry go up and down so many times. I'd love to know what was your first initial reaction to the whole grunge takeover in the 90s that really shifted the music industry in terms of metal.
I'll be honest with you. I loved it. I always loved the Seattle bands. I spent some time in Seattle when I was 19, back in 1989, and it was right as everything was starting to kind of pick up. And I loved so many great bands. Like even I love Soundgarden. I saw Soundgarden twice on the Louder Than Love tour,
Nice.
and they just always were amazing. I thought Alice in Chains was great. Melvins gets
Fantastic.
credited a lot for being a San Francisco band, but Melvins is a Seattle band. Um, I loved Nirvana. If you put on the first album, Bleach, man, it is just as raw and punk feeling as anything. And they ended up getting polished up a lot once they made it really really big. But they still, I mean, it's dark and brooding music. So many metal bands have blamed grunge for their career going down the shitter, and it's like, maybe the people were just tired of what y'all had to say at the time. It's like
Yeah.
it's generational, and that's not to say that the metal bands necessarily should try to mimic and imitate what's going on uh, with another style. But I think sometimes that happens. I mean, look at what happened with the short era of funk rock. Like,
Yeah.
at the time I loved it, and now I look back on it and it's like, oh, cringe. But um, I mean, we even put slap bass in one of our songs. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, but I, I I I love all kinds of music, man. When I'm home, I barely listen to heavy metal in my free time. It's kind of like my wife has always said. The the carpenter's wife has no furniture. It's hard to get somebody who does something all day to want to have anything to do with it in their free time. So, like, when you're if you're on our bus while we're on tour after the show, you're probably going to hear like the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack or ABBA before you hear any heavy metal, because we've been listening to it and playing it all night long. It's time to take it down a notch.
Yeah, Arrival's not a bad album. That whatever that I think it's ABBA's first or whatever.
Oh man, they just genius songwriters, and the harmonies that they came up with vocally, just unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool, man. I feel like, I prefer musicians to have a wider spectrum of music they listen to. I feel like you kind of get a lot of musicians might get tunnel visioned in the genre they play, where I feel like if you're
I've
listening to so much, it's
I've been on tour. I've been on tour with some bands with guys that are my age, and they play extreme music, and that's all they want to listen to is extreme music. And I'm like, ow, like I don't dislike it, but how can you listen to it all day? I love pizza, but I don't want it every day.
yeah, yeah. That's yeah, great way to sum it up. Yeah, man, there's so much good music out there. So much, so many amazing genres. And it's good to take as much of it as you can, I feel. Like I have my collection here is all over the place. Now I
Yeah, I
have
can
to,
tell by your posters that you got a wide spectrum of taste.
yeah, some cash. I've got some signed stuff too. I'm a collector too.
Nice.
When it comes to vinyl, and I'm like, uh, it's past. I was born in like like the end of the CD era too. So it's like, it's there's always going to be an audience for it, and that's why I feel like with Exhorder, like you must notice there are some younger people at your shows. And I feel like
Oh
like
yeah,
I saw Overkill and it's like, oh my God, half the audience is like younger than I am, which must feel
beautiful thing.
great as a musician because
Yes,
it's like the music lives on. It's gonna
yes.
always have a legacy, which is amazing. And I feel like with the whole grunge thing, a lot of these thrash bands were almost scared that, oh, is this it? But no, it's always gonna have an audience. How do you feel about that?
You could not have been more on the head with this one. 10 years ago, when I was doing some touring with Trouble overseas, I noticed, wow, the audience is old, and like that's not a good sign for future. It's just not. Now they'll come and they'll spend money and they'll have a great time, but who's going to take over when y'all are gone? It felt like, wow, this is really starting to kind of fade out. And uh and then we just did a show uh in October in Chicago, played a festival, and half of the audience was young. It's like, this is great. It's flipped around, man. And I've noticed it with Exhorder as well. When we go to play the festivals in Europe, there's people taking their children and their grandchildren to the shows. And it's not uncommon for an 8 or 9 year old kid with a mohawk to walk up to the table and want us to have him sign a picture. And always really cool and encouraging to the kids, especially when they're trying to learn music. I always tell them to stay in school, and you know, uh, I first thing I tell them is to quit playing and go to school and not worry about it. But then I laugh and tell them, no, no, no. If you believe in it, then go for it. Just always make sure you've got a backup plan, because it's so hard to make it. You don't want to discourage anybody, because if nobody's making new music, well, then eventually everything comes to an end, and that's not a good thing. But I feel really bad for a lot of the young bands that I work with, just how hard of a growth process it is for them to develop as a band starting from zero. It's a terrible time to have to do that right now.
Yeah, yeah. Like we're currently in the fourth wave of thrash metal, and there's so many bands coming up like in this decade, and it's like it's so crazy to see that like there's still new thrash bands, and it's still kids in high school doing this.
Yeah,
It's all
yeah.
social media now, I feel.
But like, I don't know, young people today are just shredding like crazy, and not just guys either, man. I did some teaching at the School of Rock here,
Oh, cool.
not far from where I live, and there's kids there that aren't even teenagers yet that are shredding, and some of them are girls, man, and they're good. It used to be, it was a fraternity. The rock and metal was a fraternity, and the girls didn't get a lot of respect. And to be fair, there were only a handful of really good girl bands that would pop up from time to time, and probably because it was just hard for them to really get a fair shake. But today, it's actually it's the girl bands that are blowing up faster
Yeah.
than or at least girl fronted bands or a band with a girl in it. And I don't have a problem with that. I know some people kind of mad about it, but for the love of God, girls have been uh, fighting the good fight long enough and having to deal with uh, oppression for long enough, man. So I say, if you can get it, girl. I mean, I don't care who's playing it, just play it well. Play it with your heart. That's all I care about.
Me too, man. And I feel the exact same way. And I feel like the reason that might be like people are just being able to shred so easily. Back in the day, I feel like to learn guitar, you had to have like Zeppelin too. You have to keep dropping the needle on that part you're trying to
Yes.
learn. Now you just log on and here's exactly how you play the Tornado of Souls solo. And it's
Yep. And
so
then
easy now.
you can also go to YouTube and go in the settings and slow down the song to 3/4 speed or half speed or quarter speed. So you can really pick out the notes and practice at a slow. And I tell everybody, this is true. I'm not the only person that believes in this. Get yourself a metronome and play the songs that are giving you challenges at a slower tempo first. And once you start being able to play them at a slower tempo, then you increase the speed, and eventually you can get up to the speed you need to play, and it's a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing advice. Very good advice. A lot of people just shred without any form of like tempo or timing. I did guitar for a little bit. Like my teacher, he's like, God, metronome, play it slow, play it in time, and then slowly build up. You're trying to just play it at full
Yes,
speed at the start. You got to work your way up to that. So a
it's
great
true.
advice. Very good advice. Now I have to. I discovered you guys online, and Slaughter was my introduction to the band. Very iconic album. I'd love to know what the writing and recording process was for Slaughter in the Vatican.
Nightmarish. So most of that album was actually on our very first demo, Get Rude. The majority of songs, at least half of the songs were on Get Rude. And then that was we did like a little tiny 3-song demo that's vanished. That was our first demo. We never sold it. We just recorded it, and it just vanished. But Get Rude was our first actual demo that we would sell at shows. And really primitive 8-track recording, down and dirty, as an early demo from the 80s would be, that you would think. And then we went into a real studio and did the demo of Slaughter in the Vatican, which had every song on it except for The Tragic Period, which was written after the band broke up in early 1988. So fast forward, we reformed, started playing, got the attention of a record label, and went into the studio to record. Well, we recorded the songs too fast. That was a problem. Those songs on that album are played way too fast. If you go back and listen to the Slaughter in the Vatican demo on YouTube, you'll see what I mean.
Hmm.
The grooves kind of disappear when it gets played too fast. So there's a lot of our groove that's missing on that album. Uh, and I know people like refer to that album as an iconic masterpiece, timeless, blah blah blah. And I'll never try to take that away from anybody for feeling that way, but that whole process was marred by error. We re-recorded all of the guitars.
Wow.
We re-recorded the bass. We re-recorded the drums. We re-recorded the vocals. So the only thing that remains from the original session is the tempos, and they're too fast. So
Wow.
I don't know. I've
Interesting.
had people ask me, why don't y'all go back and re-record that album properly? And I was like, why? You know, I, I've recorded the song Legions of Death. I have recorded one, two, three, 4 times already. not including the throwaway tracks that I had to, that we gave up. It's been on a finished product 4 times. I don't need to record that song again. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
I'd rather
Yeah.
move forward and focus on new material. And again, I don't want to tarnish anybody's idea of what that album is, and people might think I'm crazy, but yeah, that album, when it came out, we had a dream of what we wanted it to sound like, and it didn't sound like what we envisioned. So and
Interesting.
we I think we failed even worse on the law. That was even bigger nightmare for a lot of reasons. We just weren't prepared going into the studio for that album. We had to rob the Get Rude demo of some songs. We had to put a Black Sabbath song in there because we didn't have enough material. We were writing new material in the studio. We had
Wow.
guitar tone issues. Half the guitar tones didn't even make it to the album because they
Huh.
sounded terrible. So More Than the Southern Skies was the first time sonically that we hit on all cylinders, I think. And I feel
Uh,
like on Defectum Omnium, we've done the same thing. We just keep improving our sound.
wow, that's crazy to hear, man. How did RC Records treat you in terms of like studio time and a budget for Slaughter?
Um, I think it was a $5,000 budget, which probably
Wow.
today would be somewhere in the $10,000 to $15,000 range, which you can make an album on. But at the time, home studio wasn't an option. So you had to go into a studio and you had to pay the studio time, and that's not cheap. So I don't know. I know we went over budget on both albums, and RC paid for it, but I don't know. The owner of that label hated us, and Monty Connor loved us, so he did everything he could to protect us. But eventually, the owner had enough after the law and dropped us. So we had a tough go in the beginning. We were a band that we always had great results live, and that was definitely always one of the best things about Exhorder was the live show. It still is, I think. And I don't know, we just could never capture it on the album back then. And I think if we had been able to do that and maybe worked a little harder, we would have had a lot more success.
Interesting. Yeah, and I know they micromanaged too. Like I know was the original the cover for the demo of Slaughter, was that supposed to be what the actual cover was
Yeah,
supposed to be? Oh yeah.
yeah, and they refused to use it. So looking back now, it's like there's so many worse album covers that have come out since then. Like I think the thing that they really wanted to avoid was it wasn't just the Pope. It was actually John Paul, Pope John Paul II, who is better known today as Saint John Paul II.
Yeah, yeah.
So we literally have a saint, an actual saint hanging from our logo in front of a burning Vatican while children and women are crying and praying at his feet. It's awful. Uh, and I think the album cover, the way it came out, it's grown on me. I think I didn't like it at first, uh, but I think now I've got a special place in my heart for it. I think the artist Ken Matthew, who did that, I think he probably took a beating from us early on that we didn't like it. But I, rest assured, Ken, I think it's a great album cover, and I'm grateful to have had him do it.
I've seen it
But
on a lot of shirts.
it was much safer than what we wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely that first demo, the cover of that's brutal compared to the actual
What's crazy to me is there's a band from the '80s called Christian Death, and
uh-huh.
they had an album cover where, if I remember correctly, there was Christ was on the album cover, and his arms were full of hypodermic needles, and he's sitting there
Yeah,
like this
yeah.
with hypodermic needles. And I saw it on the rack at Kmart, and I remember them saying Kmart won't sell your album, and I was like, you can trash and destroy Christ all you want, but leave the Pope alone. That made no sense to me.
Yeah, the
The
irony.
Pope's more valued than Christ? You got to be kidding me. Christianity, ladies and gentlemen. You know,
That's wild that was even in Kmart. I know the cover you're talking about. That's ridiculous.
yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, but they don't want our cover. Okay.
That's stupid. That's what I'll never understand that. Now you were talking about the law. How soon after Slaughter did you guys you were saying you were even writing the law in the studio while you were recording it. Did you
Yeah.
how soon after Slaughter did you start working on the law?
We actually had the first song that we wrote for that album, not counting the two songs we pulled from our first demo. That was Incontinence and Unforgiven. Those two songs came from our first demo.
Hmm.
But we wrote I Am the Cross. The first song we wrote when we reformed in '88 was a tragic period, and then that ended up on Slaughter in the Vatican. And then the next one was I Am the Cross. And I want to say we didn't have a whole lot else happening. So I want to say probably mid 1991. Uh, Road Racer contacted us and said it's time to start putting planning on recording this new album, and we were like, oh shit, because we just had nothing. So
Wow.
and at that time we went from having the five original members to just three, and in the beginning we all wrote. So everything that you hear on Slaughter in the Vatican was collectively written by five people, whereas on the Law the burden fell more on the three remaining original members because Frankie had just joined the band, so he wasn't writing anything, and Jay had only been in the band for a short period of time and really had only been playing guitar for a few years. So he wrote a few riffs, but he didn't bring a lot to the table on that album because he was still learning the process himself. Um, he was very hands on in the studio. He had a good ear. He sat at the mixing console a lot, so his value was definitely in the production side of it. And he played his leads, obviously, but um, he did a lot. He did rhythm tracking per se. That's not to say he didn't play on the tracks. He just didn't necessarily write a lot of it. Um, but yeah, we just the three of us kind of hammered it all out as quickly as we could, and you ended up in a very short period of time getting the truth, the law, um, unborn again, uh, soul search me. Those songs were written very quickly, and I really look back at that album. It's a very disjointed album. The arrangements uh, are chaotic, and a lot of the parts never repeat, and that never did sit well with me as a songwriter and a fan of good songs. Is having a song that never repeats a part. It just makes it difficult to connect with people. I think by the time they're getting into this, it goes to the next part, and I don't know. I always say that there's probably two or three albums worth of material on that album. you know, I mean,
There's a lot on
uh,
it. I love it.
I,
I love it.
I, yeah, I mean, and some people just like that style, but we've gotten wiser. We learned from that mistake on Mourn the Southern Skies. We started, Exhorder still has to be pretty technical, but we got wiser with our song structures, and we've done continued on that path and that mindset with Defectum Omnium. So to me, the art of writing the song trumps anything else. I'm not too interested in showcasing any one particular instrument for too long. I mean, obviously the guitar solos need to be killer, uh, and it's okay to feature each instrument on their own. but I don't want to hang out there too much. You know, leave that to the Jeff Becks and the Steve Vais. You know.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, I'm very happy that the band is in such a much more comfortable position currently. I have to ask, I saw this thing on stage. You told the story about Dime, where you guys saw like a marching band and
Yes.
and apparently there's a guy grilling hot dogs, I guess. And
Yeah, that was on Mardi Gras Day. That was that at Joe Fazio's house? That was at Joe Fazio's house. Uh,
wow.
and we were God, we were probably all on acid too. And just drinking, drinking straight from the keg and tripping
Hmm.
balls and just acting like a bunch of 20-something-year-old fools, And Dime used to videotape everything, dude. He did. He carried this fucking camcorder around everywhere he went. And we were standing right next to somebody that was grilling on the front lawn. And he's like, "Hey T, take the camera, man." Take the camera, and he just reaches on the fucking edge, grab one of the ones closer to the edge. It wasn't so hot, and here comes the marching band in the parade, dude. And he just boom. And I mean, I don't know. We had to have been 20 yards away, 15, 20 yards away from this thing, and it went right into the tuba. And we're all like, "Whoa!" And it's even funnier because we're tripping, and you laugh at anything, right? Oh my god, it was just the funniest shit. And he's like, "I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna do it again," because there was another band coming right behind that one. And I'm like, "No way he gets it twice. Not a fucking chance. I shit you not." Right in the fucking tuba. I couldn't believe it.
What do you throw it like a tomahawk?
Like a baseball, like yeah,
That's amazing,
I don't
man.
know.
What a great
Insane.
story. What a great story.
Yeah. The dude was funny, man. Uh he is very missed, man. Like I never had a terrible time with that dude. Threw up more than once because of him.
Yeah, he gave like anthrax alcohol poisoning, I'm pretty sure. Like the
That
first
sounds about
show.
right.
Yeah. Great story, man. And I can't wait to see you guys on tour with Violence. It's gonna be very exciting. As we wrap up here, what's the best way for fans to stay updated with everything Exhorder?
Follow us on our socials. We post from there daily, pretty much. Facebook, Instagram. We're just starting to build our TikTok for the young folks because we don't know what we're doing and we're trying. But it's just another great outlet to reach people.
Definitely.
Um, Exhorder.com. That's run by us. All the shipping for the merchandise is done by yours truly. So if you order something online from Exhorder.com, it's me that packages it up and sends it to you. Um,
Awesome.
so yeah, but yeah, Facebook and Instagram, you're going to get probably the quickest news from us.
Awesome. Very exciting. Kyle, thank you so much for doing this, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Brandon, thank you for having me, man. I'm much appreciated for sure. Disturbing the Priest is your podcast?
Disturbing the priest, yes.
We're disturbing the priest. Absolutely.
So many
That's
people
my
are
that that
so many
that's
people are
one of my
like,
favorite Sabbath albums.
I know, man. So many people are like, where's the name coming from? I'm like, how do you not know Born Again?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
man. I'm
eerie.
telling you that
It's like a black metal Sabbath album in terms of like its
it's so
production.
it's so dark, man. It's scary, dude. I remember listening to that stuff in the dark and just being like, my skin would start crawling.
Yeah, man. Even that song "Disturbing the Priest" with like, Ian like laughing in the beginning, like
Oh, it's maniacal.
yeah, the dark going into Zero the Hero is like it's just
Yep.
such an eerie record. It's either
Yes.
you
Yes.
either love it or you hate it. It's so weird. People
I
are
don't
so
know. To
torn
me,
on it.
it's my favorite singer of all time singing with my favorite band of all time. You can't win. You can't lose.
Those bootlegs, man, of Ian singing with Sabbath when he does
Yeah.
Black Sabbath, when he does like the title track of the first album,
Yeah.
it is like holy shit.
I'm
It's like
with you,
if
dude. I love it
so
too.
good. So
Yes,
good.
indeed.
Yes. Well, I'm Brandon Battick, and this is Disturbing the Priest.